This is ClearCut Plus with Michelle Makori.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for watching. We begin with reports out of the region of a failed attempt by the Iranians to seize a British oil tanker. CNN and Sky News both reporting that armed Iranian gunboats tried to seize the tanker HMS Montrose in the Persian Gulf. This is a developing story that we're keeping our eyes on. Meanwhile, the United States is standing firm in the face of Iranian threats, Iran admitting that it is on the path to a nuclear weapon as it pressures the world into relieving the economic sanctions imposed by the U.S. since last year. Now, the tactic is not working in the U.S. President Trump today accused Tehran of never really ending its pursuit of a nuclear weapon in the first place. And he also issued a new warning to the regime, tweeting this: Iran has long been secretly enriching in total violation of the terrible $150 billion deal made by John Kerry and the Obama administration. Remember, that deal was to expire in a short number of years. Sanctions will soon be increased substantially. Now, the same cannot be said for the United Nations. Earlier today, the UN watchdog group, the International Atomic Energy Agency, held a closed-door emergency meeting that was requested by the Trump administration. However, the meeting amounted to nothing. The signatories of the 2015 deal are refusing to hold Iran accountable for its recent violations which Iran has openly flaunted on the world stage. And we have an update to share with you on an I-24 News exclusive report that we brought to you yesterday concerning secret talks in Iraq between the U.S. and Iran. Well, we asked the State Department for a response to that, and their response was simple and direct, quote, "That is false. There is no validity to this report." Now, the U.S. Special Representative for Iran, Brian Hook, also denies that there are any back-channel talks between the U.S. and Iran. But in the face of those official denials, our senior diplomatic correspondent, Christian Millard, stands behind his reporting. All right, joining me to discuss all of these developments is Matt Brodsky. He's a senior fellow with the Security Studies Group, and Naseer Alomari, a Middle East analyst. First, I want to get your thoughts on this breaking news, Matt, that Iranian gunboats tried to seize a British oil tanker in the Gulf. What do you make of that? Is this expected?
Well, Iran said it was going to do so, and interestingly enough, the proposal that the U.S. has been putting forward for there to be flagged ships trailing and basically protecting the Straits of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, what we have here is apparently the reason that the Iranian ships pulled off, or the Iranian boats, I should say, pulled off was because there was a British flagged ship there. So this is kind of what we're looking to see have happen more, to have more countries protecting their own interests inside the Gulf. It's not only good for the United States, but the overall negotiating strategy makes sense, because what the U.S. is trying to do is to make sure that when Iran acts aggressively, it annoys the rest of the world who has a stake in protecting it and protecting the Straits of Hormuz, rather than just focusing on President Trump and his economic campaign to basically sanction Iran until it comes back to the negotiating table.
Naseer, we don't have the details yet, but we understand that there were several boats and that the attack was unsuccessful. So we don't know what kind of intervention made that attack unsuccessful. We do know, as Matt mentioned, that just today we had General Joseph Dunford detailing the plans for a maritime coalition for the U.S. and its allies to patrol the Gulf of Oman, the Strait of Hormuz in particular. What do you make of the timing then of this?
Well, it's interesting, but Mr. Rouhani himself made the threat.
Yes, he did.
So this is not some general who's just, verbally trying to exaggerate. So this is from the highest level saying we are going to seize a British vessel in response to what the British did in the Straits of Gibraltar.
And that was taking a tanker that was shipping Iranian oil to Syria, which was in violation of EU sanctions, not this deal.
That's right. On the Syrian regime, which is an ally of Iran, who's also involved in and all kinds of war crimes. So I think when Mr. Rouhani himself makes this threat, that means this is serious. And they pondered that. So this was pre-planned because they did mention it a couple of times. They said, you know, Britain, you better be careful. Yeah. So when the United States talks about protecting the Strait of Hormuz, when they talk about an international force, this really amounts to the Iranians. This really amounts to a blockade. And that's why they are nervous about this, because they have the economic blockade, and now they have an actual maritime blockade. This is a
direct challenge. As you say, there were clear warnings from the president himself, Rouhani, that Iran was going to retaliate. So how does this change the game now, Naseer? How does this up the ante? I mean, at the very least, do you expect the UK to now pull back from the other parties to the JCPOA and join the US in sanctions?
I think they have already done that.
They haven't put on sanctions.
That's right, but I mean, they are actively monitoring Iran. They are seizing ships, so they are supporting the United States. They are trying to impose the sanctions. However, I think since Mr. Rouhani himself made that threat, now that is different than any general saying it, which means this is further escalation. Mr. Trump probably thought when he didn't respond to the shooting down of that drone, things would settle and would be left at that. It seems Iran is not satisfied with leaving things the way they are, just living under sanctions without any response.
Well, the president reportedly retaliated with a significant cyber attack that hasn't been confirmed, but that was the report. Matt, what is Iran trying to signal here? Is this a sign of desperation from the regime?
Well, it's still counting on the same strategy that it had before. So it wants to shake Europe's resolve, which is, well, let's face it, easily done, and to have Europe put pressure on the United States. It wants to show that President Trump is the one who is, of course, creating this type of tension when, of course, this is part of Iran's behavior, at least from the regime since 1979. So they want to shake Europe's resolve, and we'll see how they're going to respond.
Europe responding to this? Do you think that, as we discussed, this may at least make the United Kingdom take a different approach than France and Germany, and perhaps join its ally, the United States, in imposing sanctions?
I think we'll find out. But the important part is going to be when, aside from this military incident, this aspect, when we see if President Trump decides to go to the Security Council to reimpose the snapback sanctions, the international sanctions, that is a much further step that basically declares that Iran's nuclear program is illegal, a much less advantageous place for Iran to start any type of negotiation. That is something that Iran wants to protect. And this is something that, of course, we're going to need the P5+1 powers to the extent possible on our side.
Right, and it's also interesting timing, because this comes as France, in fact, sent a senior advisor directly to Tehran to try and negotiate and see if they could salvage the deal. Matt Brodsky, thank you so much. Naseer Alomari, appreciate it again. Breaking news, Iranian gunboats trying to seize a British oil tanker unsuccessfully. Still ahead, Labour Secretary